Hello and welcome to the Pixel Scandal Nerdcast. I am Kurt. I have a cast. We have a cast.
Yay!
On the Nerdcast, and we have some lovely friends in the chat. Hello, friends in the chat.
Hello, chat friends.
Right below me here.
To do on Saturday night? Sorry.
Right below me here we have End of Line. End of Line, how you doing tonight? Thumbs up from End of Line. That's good. Orestes, how you feeling?
I'm tired.
You're tired?
Yeah.
You are a robot.
You are the robot.
Well, I've got like 12 windows open and I'm on a cell phone.
You are running on a potato right
Hold
now.
on.
People think he's kidding. Gidget, how are you feeling tonight?
Also tired, but I seem to be a little more energetic than Orestes and Endaline.
That's great. You know what? I am doing great. Thanks for asking, everybody.
Yeah. Kurt, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine. I got a little. I took a hit to the face the other day, but I'm recovering nicely.
Yeah, you did. You got in a fight over.
That's what you got
over a
for
firework?
talking back to Gidget.
She only had to tell me once.
I'm just kidding. Kurt went in to try to fire a firework during our show on the 4th of July, and he and another crew member got to the shell at the same time, and the other guy was like, nope, and he's got in the way.
He threw them bows.
Yeah.
So we've got
usually a full contact sport.
We've got some interesting topics tonight. We're going to continue our intro to role playing, talking about what kind of character you might want to make and how to make those choices if you struggle with that sort of thing. We're also going to review some shit that we've done lately. And you know what? We might even talk about fireworks a little bit because I'm sure Gidget is still teeming with excitement from the week's festivities. So
It's hard to get over it quickly.
Before I pass it over for announcements, if you'd like to contact the show, you can do so by emailing us pixelscandal@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter @pixelscandal, or you can go to our website, which looks very bad, pixelscandal.com. And you know what? It's nobody's fault but my own, so I can say that. But I think that's all the shit for the top. End of line. Do we have any announcements?
Yeah, we have our game day tomorrow, Sunday at 4 p.m. PST. I believe we're going to be playing Dead by Daylight or something else. We're not positive yet, but probably Dead by Daylight. And then on July 14th, again, we have our 9 a.m. episode 4 of Dungeon World, where hats will be gotten and children will be murdered.
No murder of children.
No murder. There's no children murdering. If they die, it's their own fault, and it was by accident and by no fault of mine. If that happens,
says the child murderer.
I'm pretty sure.
I was trying to save the poor child. Anyway, this is an ongoing argument that we're having. Well, cool. Those are our announcements. What are we excited about, guys? Anything? I don't like the things that are written in the show notes. These guys are being gross.
Yeah, people are being gross in our show doc there.
I was watching him update it in real time. I can attest 100% that he's the one who did it.
Mm-hmm.
My life is going to be consumed by work for the next 3 weeks for projects, so I have nothing to look forward to for the next 3 weeks.
Aww.
I'm excited about one more day of vacation. I've been off since the 4th, which has been real nice.
Yeah.
Definitely excited about that. Also, Gather, a new game, the Kickstarter funded. I think it went 200% funded, which Gather's a story game about people coming together at a old tree to tell stories. I don't know. It's a story game. It looks really cool. It's by the same guy that wrote 10 Candles.
Oh, nice.
So that should be good times. That guy writes good games.
Yeah. I'm excited that the Critical Role Kickstarter closed yesterday at I don't know, a bajillion% funded. It was over $1 million funded.
Which is ridiculous for some minis.
So for some minis, yeah. But I'm excited about getting some really cool minis. The other thing I'm excited about is Strategicon is coming up in September, and the hotel rooms just released this weekend. And Kurt and I were able to get ours for the whole Thursday through Monday thing.
Yeah.
So
we booked early this time, so no weird fiddly crap with the room.
yeah. So we will be heading to Strategicon at the end of August, beginning of September.
Yep. If you're in the LA area and you're into role-playing games, which, I mean, you probably are if you're watching this, go check out Strategicon. It's an awesome convention with some great people.
Yeah. And we'll be there.
Yeah.
So very cool. All right. Well, moving right along. What have we been playing recently, guys?
Guild Wars
No,
2.
Mike's been playing Guild Wars 2.
Guild Wars 2. I have
So now
not
that you've been
actually
playing it
played
for a
Guild
few
Wars
days.
2.
What?
What do you think of it now that you've played it for a couple days?
Yeah.
I like it. I like it more than I did last time. I semi-played it, but that could just be because it's like accessible now, or before I had other stuff going on. I logged onto my character, my Mesmer that I made like 3 years ago, and so I played it for about a day, and then I was like, I want the expansion. So I went and bought all the 2 expansions for it. And then I logged on my 4-year-old Mesmer, and then it was like, hey, here's a bunch of birthday presents and anniversary gifts that you haven't opened in the last 4 years. So now I've got like 3 level 20 boosts, a level 30, 40, 50 boost, and 2 level 80 boosts. So I'm like, man, they just really don't want me to level at all in this game. So now I have to make 8 characters.
Well, understand something without getting too far in depth. Once you get cap level, you still want to do all the back content to level up your prestige stuff. So you'll end up doing all that content regardless, even if you boost. Just so you know.
Yeah.
We've been playing a lot of Dead by Daylight, that horror game you guys played this morning for a little while.
Yeah, I got to play.
Is that one of those like anime games where you seduce a woman? A horror game?
A horror
It's
game?
one where you play a monster and you kill your friends. It's been a lot of fun. There's like there's an event going on right now, so we've been playing a lot this weekend. It's been fun.
I finally got to play it today.
Yeah, we
Finally got to
I
play.
finally got to install it after buying it like a week and a half ago.
Yeah. I am really bad at the skill checks. I explode all of the generators and poorly heal anyone who needs my help.
I love when you're being healed too, because there's this little skill check mechanic where it like pops up a circle and you have to tap space or whatever. And if someone's healing you and they fail the skill check, you like scream out in pain.
Yeah, it hurts them.
I'm really bad at that, but
So
you know, if you
that.
want the heals, it comes with a little pain.
All right.
I'm not a gentle nurse, apparently.
I was thinking about something yesterday with that. Do you guys remember playing Shadow Hunter?
Yeah. The shotgun nurse.
Yeah, well, you remember we had that item where it could hurt you if it was a med kit? We're like, well, how does that work out? Well, now you know.
Now
you pull out the scissors and you just start stabbing.
Start stabbing people instead. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that game is fun. I liked it, but I can't stand PvP. So I like the 5 pre-made group custom games that automatically just unlocks everything for you, so you don't need to buy.
Yeah, those
skills
custom
and
games
updates.
are fun.
Yeah, so I'm
That's
just
what
like,
we did
okay,
this
well,
morning.
you guys have fun doing your grinding of your blood points and leveling up legit. When you do a 5-person group, I'll just be here with all my free stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I played Talos Principle last night for the first time, which I super enjoy. I really love puzzle games, so getting to play a new puzzle game that I haven't played before is always a happy day. And yay for Steam sales!
Ooh,
Cool game.
Steam sale.
Yeah.
I recently joined a community called The Gauntlet after excessive prodding from a guy from over at Happy Jacks named Tomer. He finally convinced me to go ahead and hop in their Patreon and support their thing. And I got into my first game, my first Gauntlet game this morning. It was session 0 for a Velvet Glove, which Velvet Glove is a game where you play teenage girls in a gang. So it's teenage girl gangs in the 70s. And the themes are very much about the things that plague teenage girls, like violence and sexuality. It is not a cute and fluffy kind of game. It is definitely a very violent game. But we didn't get into actual scenes today. We just did the like session 0, made our gang, made our characters, and I am super happy about the slick chicks, and looking forward to the next game of that. That
Nice.
should be pretty cool.
And what hairstyle does your character have?
A frony tail, according to Katie. I looked up. I actually looked up African American ginger because I was like, oh, this is gonna be perfect because they got the freckles everywhere, and the picture I found had this like, it's like somewhere between a fro and a pony, like a top pony, and it's like right on top of their head, and Gidget dubbed that the frony tail. So yeah, so my character has a frony tail. Her name is January. She was born in December, but Mama doesn't make compromises, and they already picked the name.
Nice. Very nice.
But yeah, that's what I've been playing recently.
Cool. All right. Well, moving on to our spotlight topic of the evening. This is part 4 of our intro to role-playing, which is what kind of character should I play?
Bard.
Bard. So this was a topic submitted by Orez but I'll go ahead and walk us through it here. The main question and I think the framing of this is not so much like how to tell someone what they should play, but how to help guide someone to what they actually want through a series of questions, or framing the how characters are sort of made, and then sort of guide how do you guide a new player into a character they'll enjoy?
I don't think it's necessarily even a new character. I think it's anyone in general when you sit down to a new game. How do you decide from the vast decision making of what kind of character you're going to play? How do you narrow that down to what you're actually going to be playing in that campaign?
Right. I mean, when your possibilities are endless.
Right.
What do you do?
Where do you start?
So the first thing we have here is evaluating the setting. Orestes, you wanna elaborate on that a little bit?
Not really.
I was waiting for you to just go, no.
No.
Okay. Let me try to remember back to a week ago where I wrote that. What was I thinking? No, so the setting is just like, is it a fantasy setting? Is it like a cyberpunk? Is it like a tech thing? You have to kind of know like what world is your game happening in, and that's kind of like the first step. Like if you're playing like Shadowrun, you're probably not going to be a traditional wizard. Like you're probably not going to run around, finding books and casting fireball. Okay, I shouldn't put it that way because Kurt's character did that literally every round.
Hey, I cast
Just running around
Powerball. Thanks.
Powerball and
Powerball.
Powerbolt and killing himself with
Suicide ball.
He
overcasting.
was playing the lottery, Powerball.
Hey, if a
Yeah.
game lets you kill yourself to cast stronger magic, that's
Yeah.
the way I'm going out every time.
But then, so let's go the other way. Then you're not going to be a fantasy game and run around playing a hacker.
Right.
So it's kind of like first you need to evaluate the setting and see kind of like what is available, what makes sense to the world that your game is taking place in. So that's going back to having the conversation like with the GM about what is everybody expecting to get out of the game and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You just gonna have to kind of be cognizant of what the setting is before diving headfirst into making a new character.
I think finding touchstones can be really useful for that. And by touchstones, I mean
drive it back to media that we consume, right?
Mm-hmm.
so if it's a fantasy game, is it a Lord of the Rings type of fantasy, high fantasy, lots of questing, lots of walking, or is it a modern fantasy game? Like, are you driving towards a Dresden Files or a like typical D&D, right? If people know, if they're familiar with D&D, are you driving for that epic fantasy quests and adventure? What are things that I already know that can relate me to the setting, right? And so that helps get everyone on the same page pretty quickly. I know a lot of newer games that come out now, in the back, they'll have like a page or two of touchstones where it's like, I think I was reading a cyberpunk game and it was like, oh yeah, read Burning Chrome and watch Blade Runner, and here's the things that you're going to want to say. And then when you start to make your character, you can think, okay, do I want to be Deckard? Or do I want to be Bilbo? Like, am I going to be a halfling thief? So it's a way to sort of bootstrap that concept, right? And to get everybody in the same headspace.
Didn't the Dresden Fate game have something similar to that, where it was like, hey, if you want to be like Harry, make a wizard. If you want to be like Billy, make a werewolf or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it definitely assumed that you were familiar with the characters of the world, and so it sort of told you how to build characters like them, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think we do it ourselves even when it's not written in the book, when you're like, hey, we're going to play this game like Bedlam Hall, and they're like, oh, well, what's that game like? And you're like, oh, well, it's a mix between Addams Family and Downton Abbey. And it's, it gives you those, oh, okay, I get what, it's Victorian, it's dark, it's, and we do that with settings to help each other kind of figure out like, oh, okay, when I'm thinking about my character, this is the type of world or this is the type of feel that this game is going to have.
Yeah. Something I would add in between this and our next thing is tone. Because if you're gonna, if you definitely want to know, is this gonna be like a very serious game or like a sort of slapsticky, goofy game? Like if you're going into a horror game and they say, all right, let's start making characters, and you sit down and make Shaggy and Scooby and somebody else is making a Innsmouth detective, like you're going to end up, like there's going to be a clash there, right? So making sure you understand the tone as well, not just the genre, will help sort of focus, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So the next bullet point we have here is group makeup.
Yeah, so there's, everybody's familiar with like the Holy Trinity, the tank, DPS, and mage, or caster, healer, whatever. That is really like kind of an optional thing. Like if your whole group is kind of optimizing, like there was an instance where we were playing, hey Moose. There was an instance where we were playing at the library, Living Greyhawk, and for that setting we really needed to kind of optimize, and we really needed that Holy Trinity, because I don't know if anybody's familiar with Living Greyhawk and the whole D&D 3.5 living setting campaign, all that good stuff. They had a very kind of not strict, but they had a very kind of recommended checklist of things that you needed to be able to do at certain levels in order to really kind of contribute to your class. So that's kind of where that came from. Like, you wouldn't make a group of 5 rogues, in an organized play environment like that, because it wouldn't perform well. You could do that with clerics, because clerics were stupid broken, and probably druids. But yeah, so like group makeup is kind of optional, but a lot of people, like myself, I like playing support. So my favorite type of support is like in our D&D 4th edition, my lazy warlord, where I just make everybody run around and do the things, and I bring a d20 for rolling initiative, and then I don't touch dice for the rest of the game. If there are no melee characters in the party, that character is not going to be useful at all. So that's where you would need to take like your group into account, kind of figure out if you know what you want to do and how that would interact with the rest of your party.
I like the way that you said that was optional too, because I think that sometimes everybody playing a disjointed group sometimes can be fun, because you're like, oh man, we have to figure out how to solve this problem outside of the normal, like, okay, we're going to just kill everything because we don't have the right group makeup, or we all made really talky characters, so I guess this is going to be a really high RP game, and so sometimes optimizing the group isn't necessary, and that kind of lopsided power can bring out its own fun gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to also consider, are you playing a mod? Are you playing a house game?
Mm-hmm.
And is it on a scale of 1 to 10, how unoptimized is your group? 1 being having a solid tank, having a solid healer, having a solid controller or utility class, and then having good DPS, versus having 6 rogues or something like that. Like, because if you're playing a mod, you're gonna have a bad time unless that DM takes a enormous amount of liberties with the scaling, because you're gonna get stomped and no one's gonna have a good time. He or she's not gonna have a good time as DM, and the players are not gonna have a good time. But if you find yourself somewhere in the 4 to 6 range of an unoptimized group, you probably do fine as long as you play carefully. And I think that's where it comes into play. Like, if you're playing a house game where your DM is creating a campaign for you and they're creating this world for you, then they can take a good deal of liberties with what they're doing to make it fit to the composition of the group. So like 6 rogues, very unusual. But if he or she are creating a campaign and saying, okay, you're going to go burgle a bunch of stuff from this castle.
Well, I mean, that's Blades in the Dark, right?
Yeah. Suddenly 5 or 6 rogues is maybe unusual, but it certainly plays to your strengths. And the GM can kind of work with that. But I'd be very careful about playing very, very unoptimized parties in an actual constructed mod, because it's probably not going to go well for anyone.
Well, and I think that goes into evaluating the setting too, right? That's when you start to decide like what kind of character you're going to play. What's the feel of the game, the tone, like Kurt was saying. If it's necessary to be really optimized, then you need to talk about that as a group, and if it's not, then you talk about that as a group as well, and kind of go from there. And I think it starts to fall on the more experienced RP players to kind of take a little bit of a backseat, or at least that's how I am, where if there's a lot of new people at the table, I let them all kind of pick whatever sounds fun to them first, and then I look at like, okay, what are the big holes in our group that are going to be a problem later on down the road, and then I might play the character that's going to fill that space, just because I've played a bunch, and so I'm okay playing a bunch of different kinds of things. But a new player, I want them to be able to experience whatever that idealized character of their first character is going to be in their head without having to fill specific roles.
And there's a difference between playing an optimized role and playing a role optimally.
Right.
A person who's been playing the game for a while,
right,
can play something and flex their role and play that role more optimally,
right,
to counteract what the newer players and whatnot. And yeah, I think it's kind of an unspoken rule. I mean, or it's not really spoken, but I think it's understood,
right, that
if you're sitting at a table for a one shop at a convention or whatever, and you clearly have played this setting before, or you've played this particular system before, and you have people that don't, full well that whatever you play, you will find a way to make it sing, whereas they're going to struggle and enjoy it less if they're not playing something that they really can get into that syncs with their personality or what they're trying to get out of the game.
Right. And I think again, like getting back, you mentioned everybody knows the Holy Trinity. I would say probably everybody probably doesn't know what the Holy Trinity means.
You're cutting out, Kurt.
Oh, I wonder why that is. I don't think everybody would know what the Holy Trinity is. So that's comes from old school D&D and eventually MMOs, where you have someone who can take all the damage or prevent all the damage from hitting everybody else. Someone who can deal a ton of damage, more so than others. But it's probably a little less tanky. Like, they're not going to be able to take damage very well, and they're probably not going to have a ton of utility. And then you have someone who's really useful. They can heal or, aid or hinder aid allies, hinder enemies, and that forms that Holy Trinity. But then again, that Holy Trinity only really comes in if you're playing a game that requires like tactical combat, right? If you're playing a D&D Pathfinder type of game, or even other genres that use a more tactical setting, right? That's going to come in more. But if the game is less focused on combat or your own character's effectiveness and more on how you play your character and who the interactions that you have, then it's going to be less necessary to have those optimizations and have that group cohesion. So that's something you want to know ahead of time, right? Like, do I need to consider the other characters' roles as far as what they can do in a fight, or is that not the focus of this game? Like, knowing that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Rock, paper, scissors for cleric.
For bard.
Bard,
No,
man.
man.
Always bard.
I'll jump on that bard.
So our next bullet point here is choosing an archetype.
Yeah, so that's probably the most important, one of the most important decisions that you'll have to make when making a new character. And generally, so like archetype is broken up. It could also be called like it could also be a character class. Could be broken down in there, but it's pretty much just deciding on what you want to do. So like the way I break it down whenever I'm helping a new player make a character is like there's just some questions that kind of go through. Like first, do you want to do like I always start in combat because to me when I started playing tabletop games, I started with D&D, and so to me every system is based around combat. So to me, I always start with, okay, do you want to do melee or ranged? So pick one of those two. Do you want to get up in the bad guy's face and poke them or hit them or kick them, smash them with the stick, or do you want to stand far back and pew pew? And then once the person makes that decision, it's like, okay, now let's break that down. So say they choose range. It's like, do you want to be arcane? Do you want to be like a spellcaster, like a wizard or a sorcerer or something? Do you want to be like a ranger? Or do you want to just be like a monk that throws a million throwing stars at a time? You could do that too sometimes. So then we just kind of go through these characters, and that doesn't dictate what kind of class they're going to play, but it kind of gives an idea of like what might be fun for that person. So it's like
start big and narrow
Yeah.
it down until you find out what's left that makes sense. You say, okay, here are some options that fit what you're talking about. What sounds fun and cool to you?
And it's kind of up to the person asking the questions to be familiar with the setting and the system that you're playing in, because you don't want to you want to be able to filter out these questions, and you don't want to kind of guide them towards an option that's not really an option. So it's like if we were playing D&D, I mean, obviously wouldn't ask questions like, how are you with technology? It's like, I'm amazing at, hacking. It's like, well, that doesn't exist, so sorry.
Get your abacus out and solve that puzzle.
Yeah, so it's kind of, there's just some questions that you kind of want to ask to kind of narrow it down and be like, okay, well, it sounds to me like you would have a lot of fun playing X. And then you pull out the rule book and you kind of start reading through, the bits about that class and explaining how kind of things work and go from there.
When I ask those questions, I tend to start with the big core conceits of the game. So like in my current campaign, it's a fantasy setting, but it's a little further forward than your average D&D. But I think my first question was always, do you know how to use magic? Because we're using Savage Worlds, and so there's no classes. It's just, this is a big character choice right here. Do you know magic, right? Because you could. I tend to start there unless we're in a game where that's not really relevant, and so then I'd start with, like, if we were doing Shadowrun, I would ask, do you know magic, or do you have a lot of cyberware, right? Like, are you chromed out? So like, find out what your core conceits are, what's cool about your game, like what are the setting pillars, and then key off of those, and then narrow focus from there.
Right.
Because I mean, in a vampire game, you're going to have a whole different set of questions, right? Like,
it's like, do you want to be Malkavian or do you want to be somebody who sucks?
Yeah, right. Okay.
Pretty much.
Do you want to be Tal'Dorei, or do you want to, or Toreador? Not Tal'Dorei. Do you want to be Toreador, or do you want to be somebody who sucks? Tori for life. Yeah. So I mean, find out what the pillars are of the game. Find out what the core of the game is going to be. If it's going to focus on combat, ask a lot of questions focused on how you want to get in a fight. If it's going to focus on politics, ask how you want to engage in those politics. Like, do you want to be someone who can run a room, or do you want to be someone who kind of stands in the back and grunts every now and again, and then has one thoughtful thing to say until it's time to go be in a duel when you're playing an L5R game? Like,
right. Are you going with the status quo and fighting for it, or are you going to be an anarchist? Like, where in this political fight are you going to be in this setting?
right.
Whatever the I think the biggest diverging themes are in that game is decide that piece, and then from there narrow and narrow, whatever the game system you're using.
Yeah, and make sure you let them know which classes or at least what skills are for the talky bits of the game, because a lot of new players are kind of like, well, I don't really want to be the center of attention. I don't really want to be, persuasive or diplomatic, the face of the group.
First
when they're
time
new
out,
to
yeah.
the game.
And not to call out our community, but let's be real here. We have a lot of introverted people in our community, and so they're not going to be super duper comfort around a bunch of people that they don't know yet, and they're not going to be very extroverted as a character. So probably don't want to make them the quote unquote face of the party, where they have to do a lot of dialogue and get really immersed into roleplay right off the bat. It might be better for them to be something that is a little bit more combat driven, perhaps. I mean, unless they really want to get into that, obviously it's up to them. But
Yeah,
I have found a lot of times that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I've met
Careful about that.
I've met a lot of players that come in, and the last thing you want to do is tell someone they can't be the thing they think is cool.
Right.
Yep.
Like, let them be the cool thing. Even especially if this is their first time with role playing, just let them do the cool thing and then adjust. Like.
Right. I think the biggest thing to point out to new players for sure is the link between being the face talky character and being attractive. I think in a lot of games, those two things, because of charisma, are linked to each other. And so a lot of times a new player is like, oh yeah, I'm super sexy, and they're like describing this persona they want for themselves, and then you get into the game and you're like, no, you're good at talking, you wanted to be sexy, and they don't realize that charisma stat that links their sexiness is also what makes them good at talking to people. And so I think definitely pointing that piece out and making sure that they understand how their sexiness is going to translate into the actual function of their characters is going to be important as well.
Yeah.
No. You take care of this. You have a D12 in cleavage.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
And
Use
in
your
the,
sex.
in the
Use
case
your
of
sex,
sorcerers and bards,
That-
where you use your sexiness to deal damage.
That bulge is gonna do wonders for you, man.
Save the party so many times. Unsung heroes, the bulges.
So our next bullet point here is choosing character flaws.
Don't do it.
I'll be right back.
So, yeah, character flaws
Sorry, I
are
have to
like,
save the dog.
I put this one last because generally this is when you're on this point you have your character down on paper. Like, you know what your stats are, you know what you're good at, you know what you can do, you know kind of what the setting is of the campaign that you're playing in. So you kind of have everything now, you just don't have a personality. And so like the character flaws are what gives your character personality, because nobody's perfect. Like, nobody has, a perfect background and all that good stuff. So like that's how you start giving flavor to your character and making it an actual interesting character instead of just a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. And some settings factor that into the character creation, like Savage Worlds with your flaws and your edges and all that good stuff. But just because there's not like a mechanical benefit to having flaws doesn't mean that you don't want to have any, because you got to have something in your backstory to make your character interesting. Otherwise you're just going to be like, that guy, he just shows up and throws fireballs, we don't really know anything about him, he's kind of lame.
I'm trying to remember what game we were playing with my gnome Fabulous, and I don't think it was Savage. Yeah, my narcoleptic gnome caster.
That was in our Raven Queen game that Michael Tanaka was running for us.
Yeah. And for like no benefit, actually quite a detriment, anytime that I would roll a 1 on any dice, he would just fall asleep for 1d4 rounds. He's narcoleptic, so he'd just fall asleep random.
Didn't you make a helmet out of pillows? Didn't you have like a helmet
he had
made of
pillows. He had pillows taped around his head so when he'd fall, he wouldn't hurt his head. But it also mean I had a listening check failure. I had like a -6 to listening checks because I had pillows around my ears. So yeah, he was a messed up character, but again, it was a negative that gave him some interesting flavor that made him fun to play.
And that's the character you remember, right? You don't remember Sir the best at shooting fireballs. You remember the guy, the stupid gnome that fell asleep all the time.
Right, exactly. I mean, your current character, his big flaw is that he's got like a I don't know, you've got like a writer riding along in your head that's talking to you and making you seem crazy all the time.
Yep.
So
Luda's Life is saying that they once had a trust fall where they had to roll to avoid punching all new people in the face. They had a fault. Sorry, a trust. I read that as trust fall. It's like, why would they punch people on a trust fall? Trust.
Very aggressive trust fall.
See, my solution to that, Loot, would be as your party member, I would tie your hands together anytime we went to public places.
yeah.
I would have to restrain you and then be like, no, we're going into this pub. Not again.
I played a character who was like kind of claustrophobic. She would burn down buildings if she was inside for too long, which made that campaign real interesting when we'd go inside and they'd start having these really long, drawn-out conversations with people. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like sitting there and I'm looking at Kurt who's GMing the game and he's looking at me like, she's getting irritated, isn't she? And I'm like, yeah. I start a little fire in the corner.
Is that your star-packed warlock?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she would freak out anytime she couldn't see the stars, so she'd set buildings on fire. So
why don't we go get some fresh air?
Right. Everybody was constantly taking me outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I make a character, I typically start with the flaw. Before I think about like what the character is going to be, I think about like what are their flaws and what are their motivations in life, like what drove them to go do whatever it is the campaign wants them to do. Mm-hmm. And so recently we had Gidget ran a game where I played a wizard who had they had trouble forming relationships. Like they got what am I trying to say? When you like push people away whenever someone tries to get too close. Anyways,
trust issues?
Yeah, when anyway, well they would like run away from responsibility anytime mm-hmm. that got there. And so all of their spells and everything were about the sky and freedom of movement, and like his dream was to get the fly spell so that he could like be completely free. Because he never wanted to be tied down, and like I mean, because and then of course I wrote a backstory to fit that was, you know, he had a lot of responsibility as a kid, and he was supposed to be a noble or whatever, and he ran away from all that responsibility and never wanted. And every time someone tried to get close to him, he would run away or he'd push them away, and so then like it sort of I had to go wizard because I needed to be able to fly so I could get away from stuff, and so that sort of informed that choice.
And one of the most, I think, interesting moments in that game was when that character found an umbrella that had featherfall on it. And so if he jumped off of something, he could technically fly mm-hmm. for a short distance before he would land on the ground again. And the character and Kurt were so happy to be able to get an item that kind of fed into that flaw and that backstory part of wanting to fly. I mean, that's...
Right.
Yeah.
That was really awesome. And of course, it's not just that I wanted the character to stay stagnant like that forever. I wanted to see the character grow and learn to overcome those flaws. Mm-hmm. And so usually when I put a flaw on a character, it's because I want to, through play, have that character overcome that flaw. And a lot of games have a way for you to buy off flaws if they do grant a mechanical benefit. But even if you're just throwing it in for flavor, I really like seeing the arc, right? Like I like seeing the growth in the character and how the relationships with the other party members aids them in overcoming these flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And character flaws can be earned during the course of the game too. Like you don't necessarily have to have them at creation. Like I had a monk who at level 2, we had a jump check that was a DC 5. It was a 5-foot long jump check in D&D 3.5, and I failed it 3 times in a row. I was a monk, couldn't jump 5 foot, so that kind of started him on a journey of I will never fail another jump check again as long as I live. And so by the time we hit level 11, he had something like a plus 63 jump, and it was amazing. So that one character flaw, like right at the beginning, he was just like so embarrassed. He was just devastated that he couldn't clear a 5-foot gap, and he was a monk, a master of the physical and all this stuff. And that just kind of led him on a journey of I am the master jumper. And that was a lot of fun for that character, because with the weird 3-5 grapple rules, I would quite frequently just grab somebody and leap up on top of a roof with them and suplex them. And that was all because I fell in a hole one day 3 times in a row. And
well, Kurt had a character once who opened a book and took a whole bunch of damage, and then for the rest of the campaign was terrified of books.
Oh yeah, books are the source of all evil.
Vividly.
Right? Every time we get in a library, he's like, "No, not the books!" and like freak out.
Well, it almost killed him, that one book.
Yeah,
that's the perfect place to cast explosive runes, inside a book. Somebody's gonna read it eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
That fit with the setting, right? That wasn't me like derailing a game about going to libraries. That was we were playing a fantasy game where I was a martial character. I was like a general or something. I didn't have any magic or anything like that. I wasn't like a learned guy. I was just like a soldier. And so it made sense that my character could reasonably be terrified of books, and it would not impact the game in any way, except every time there were books, like I could throw a fit and it would be like an interesting part of the party dynamic when, oh, we need to go do some research, and I'm like, no, terrible research, get away.
Except for the group wizard who had to hide their spell book from me all the time.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, this is my book, but I've had this one forever. It doesn't hurt. You can trust it.
Yeah, exactly. I think character flaws are the same as real people. The things that make us flawed are the things that make us interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the things that make us interesting as characters sometimes are things we built in, and some things are things that develop as we go through gameplay. I'm currently playing a character in Kurt's What's in the Box game, who started out as a like ranger hunter type character, and she's now a paladin, and she has a hindrance where if her animal companion, who is a tiger, gets hurt in any way, I basically go all crazy mama bear and like have -2 to everything I do until I can make sure he's okay. And that came out through gameplay, that I failed a fear check while he was being hurt, and so now I have that thing. But it completely makes sense for my character that would happen, because I do treat this tiger like it is my baby. So, it's...
Well, to be fair,
it's interesting.
Stormy is a scientist.
Stormy
He's
is
very
a scientist.
very special tiger.
He's a very special tiger.
So something I'd like to add, I mean, and I'd like to sort of like round this all out, bringing it back to advice for new players or an intro to role-playing, is taking all of these choices, like once you've narrowed down the type of character you want to play and the mechanics you want to engage with in the game and the flaws you want your character to have, how do you take that and wrap it all up into a nice little backstory and figure out why this character is the way they are? Mm-hmm. A lot of times I'll take that flaw and probably like one other element, and I'll build from there. Like I said earlier, the guy who I wanted him to have fear of commitment. Haha, that's what it was. He had a fear of commitment, and it was because of this like overbearing family that he had, right? And so that I had to discover the overbearing family to explain why they had this flaw. So if once you've picked a thing you think is going to be interesting to play, try to consider, okay, well, what got them to that point? Why do they feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
What could possibly change this about this person? And so then you start building in these, like the relationships and the things that have happened to them in the past that drove them to these choices. But as you're doing that, be careful not to cement the character to a point where they're incapable of change.
Right.
Because the worst thing for me is having
a character
who is so like set in their ways that they refuse to change. Like the person who says, "Oh, well, my character wouldn't do that." But would they? If a real person was presented with new information, they would change, right? They like when people are presented new information, new perspectives, their outcome changes or their outlook changes. And so be willing to grow that character and to change those things over time.
I think a very good example of this is that character I was just talking about in Kurt's game. When I started that game, she was a pacifist and would not hurt anybody and got really upset when anybody killed anybody. And that was just kind of, I had decided I was going to play her as a pacifist. And after being on an island and fighting for her life and almost being destroyed by a demon and having her, a demon and having her body possessed by a god and growing kitty hands out of her hands and just kind of
and now she blows legs off of people and kills children.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in our party kind of gives me crap about it now, like, oh yeah, I thought you didn't kill people, but it's like, no, my character has changed. She may have started as a pacifist, but she's been through some shit, and now she's like, no, you're not going to hurt me anymore, and so she does kill. She does protect herself, and that's been, I think, maybe not character growth, but character change that has happened over the last 3 years that we've been playing this game.
Right. So, to contrast this, like, having all this information all at the start, because I've played a lot of games where I've gone in with like a, 2-page backstory or something like that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes that's awesome, and the GM wants that out of the players. Like they take that 2-page backstory and they model a big chunk of the game around your backstory, right? And everyone's backstory, right?
That's the kind of GM I am.
Yeah, and so some GMs or game masters really want those story hooks in your backstory, so they want to know about the father that went missing, which is your impetus for going adventuring, or the kid that you have at home that you sometimes have to take with you on shadow runs, right? Because you just can't get a babysitter. Like some GMs want that stuff. Other people prefer to learn about their character as the game goes. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's perfectly fine to have one or the other, as long as the GM and the player are in they're equally happy about the style. So if you're going into a game, and I think Orestes is a little more like this, like you prefer to get the mechanics down and then learn who the character is over the course of sessions, rather than coming in with several page backstory.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it. Like I'll do a little something, just why are they involved with the party? Like why are they here?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of my character advancement and development I like to do in game. It's like reactions to events that have happened.
And you develop a personality based on those situations.
Yeah, by making those minute-to-minute choices of like, how would my character react to this situation? Oh, they would react like this. And then after the fact, you come up with why they would react that way.
And I completely agree with what Orestes said. I think if you're not going to go into this long backstory, there's one very simple question you should ask yourself if you're just want the basis for any type of, this is what happened to me before I got to this point, which is, why am I with the people I'm about to be in a group with, or what stopped me from doing my everyday normal life and became an adventurer, or what led me to start breaking the law and become a shadow runner, like whatever the system you're playing, what is it that changed in your life that made you go to where this game is going to pick up? And you don't have to write a long backstory. It could just be like, my husband and my kid got murdered by the,
they kicked my dog.
Raku? Is that how you say it?
And
And so I joined the Shadowrun, this group because I want to take them down. Like, that's simple. It doesn't have to be this long backstory. It can just be like, this is my motivation, and now I'm going to figure out what the personality is and everything of this character as I play them.
Yeah. I mean, John Wick's backstory is they killed my dog and they shot my dog and stole my car.
Like, I'm a big fan of the PBTA, like, strings and connections or whatever they call it for whatever version.
Bonds.
It's different in everyone.
Yeah.
Like, usually, no matter what setting or we're in or what game we're playing or what environment or rule set or anything like that, I usually have I usually try to have some link to at least one other character at the table.
You and I are usually best friends?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah, like I usually like to have at least one link with one other player at the table. That way it's like, okay, well, there's this person who is like, this is my string. Like, this is why I'm here. Because I know this guy. We go way back. We were hanging out. Like, something happened, and now I'm here to back them up, stuff like that. And then that kind of starts a stepping stone. Because, I mean, in reality, if a group of 6 complete strangers showed up together to do a job and a monster popped out, why would I help any of them?
I just take off, be like, all right, I just have to be faster than the slowest one of you.
Yeah, it's like, all right, see
I
you
played
guys,
that game with End of Line, where we all ran away, and one of us, I think somebody turned, and someone got stunned, and we were like, sweet, 3 of us get away.
Yep. Yeah, so it's like, if I'm there and 5 strangers, it's like, see you guys, this was a short game, that's great. But if a friend is there, somebody who I've known is there, and they're in trouble, it's like, well, I got to stick it out.
Right.
So that kind of gives me a link just right off the bat.
And we did that when we started our last 4th edition D&D game, where we came up with little ways that we all knew each other, even though that's not like a mechanic in 4th edition D&D. But we did that just so that some of us did have those kinds of connections or ties to each other. End of Line and I, our characters grew up in the same orphanage. Just those little things that tie your characters together that are like, this is why I wouldn't immediately run away and push them down in front of the rolling boulder or the zombie horde or whatever. There's a reason, more than just because we're friends and we all sat down at a table together.
All right.
Well, cool.
I think that's a pretty good overview of how to start making a character and how to conceptualize and think about what goes into a character and where you want to start and what the core things about the character are going to be relative to the setting. And the biggest thing is going to be talk to your group. Make sure, if you have the option, make your characters as a group. Have everyone make characters together with the GM there, so you can ask setting questions, you can talk to the other players, you can form those bonds and find out. Make sure that everyone is expecting the same kind of game.
Right.
And I think that's going to help you have a good time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I really like group creation because there's always like something that somebody wants. There's no matter what system you're playing, there's already somebody who knows the rules better than the next, or somebody who has an idea of something better than somebody else. But yeah, I want to play this type of character, and I really want to do this, but I don't know how. But then this person would be like, oh well, you can try doing this. So if you build as a group, you might have like somebody else might have an idea of do something that's your character that you hadn't thought of. So it's always good for me to like kind of do the group character building, because then you just get more ideas. Like everything is more interesting when you're bouncing it off multiple people.
Oh yeah.
Or sometimes you sit down at a table and you were invited to play a game and you have absolutely no idea what kind of character you want to play, but everybody starts talking about the character ideas they have, and then something comes up that you're like, oh, this kind of character would fit perfectly into this group. This character concept or this style or whatever, and sometimes it's good to make them as a group just because you're drawing a blank and you need that creative feedback from everybody else to really figure out where you're gonna fit into this game. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for sticking with us and for hanging out while we talked about how to make characters. I hope you found something interesting or something that you can pass on to a new player, or if you're a new player, I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow, or if you're on YouTube, give us a subscribe, or if you'd like to contact us, you can email us pixelscandal@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Twitter @pixelscandal on Twitter. Did anybody write us an outro?
Well, Handor's not here, so... But we will have our 4th game of Dungeon World next Saturday. So please come and join us for our 4th session.
All right. And thank you so much for hanging out in the chat.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Bye.